بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي أنعم علينا بهذا الدين وفضل لنا على كثير من خلق تفضيلا والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله محمد المصطفى صلى الله عليه وسلم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So we're going to break this discussion into a few segments, inshallah. So the way that this layout is going to be, well, I guess I can just briefly mention before I do so the importance of this topic. I think the importance of this topic is pretty self-evident. The fact that we're all, Muslims here in America, and as young people we are faced with this dilemma of how to get married. In traditional societies and cultures and countries, this might be a lot easier to answer because there might already be a norm or a pattern established, such as from where many of our fathers or forefathers or parents may have come from prior to coming to these lands. They tended to have sort of an arranged marriage set up, where families would really know other families, and it would sort of be understood, or there would be a selection process that would unfold. Okay, that was very natural. Whereas here in the U.S., as Muslims, we are in the infancy of the development of our community, and we have so much diversity coming from all different parts of the world, with various different cultural backgrounds and different practices and customs for marriage, and sometimes being more isolated away from our cultures of origin, such as not having that extended family or that natural sort of setup as our parents or grandparents for those who were born, for those who migrated here. And those who have not migrated here, it's still an adjustment process, because the converts, they also face this dilemma as well in terms of how to strike this balance between finding a spouse without breaking the laws and the rules of Allah Ta'ala, and being able to find somebody that's going to be suitable for them at the same time, without that sort of network and that norm and that system that may have unfolded in many of our parents' countries. For those born Muslim, for those who are born Muslim. Now, the way that we're going to unfold this is that for the first segment, which will take us until 8 o'clock, inshallah, I will just briefly cover some of the psychological research and some of the norms and patterns regarding arranged marriages versus choice marriages. And then I will propose, as a result of that research, some suggestions and ideas for how to then make this transition. And there will be an element in that second segment where I will talk about how to assess for a spouse, a suitable spouse, without breaking the rules of the Sharia, how to be effective in selecting your spouse, okay, without breaking the rules of the Sharia. Now, the third segment will then be regarding the early stages of the relationship, which we need to have some information about, and what are characteristics of healthy couples, okay. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And that will close up our program, inshallah, and we'll have Q&A. Okay? So we'll just jump right in, inshallah, being mindful of the time until Maghrib. So let's take a look at this in terms of premarital considerations right now for Muslims, American Muslims in the U.S. As we know, the divorce rate for the normative American population is about 50%. Okay? And a lot of people don't know about the other 50%, the ones that survive. So tend to assume that those guys are doing okay. But the 50% that remain, 25% of them are dissatisfied with their relationships. Okay? So that brings us to a 75% failure rate of marriages in the U.S. Okay? Now, as Muslims, American Muslims, we might assume that we're doing a little bit better, and I think that assumption is true to some extent. But the American Muslim population is about 31% divorce rate, which is still high. And if we take the 69% that's remaining, what about those 69%? We can pretty well assume that they are nearly half of those marriages are also dissatisfied. Okay? And so that'll bring our number up to about 60% versus 75% of the normative American population. Okay? So that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. You're looking at more than chance variable, more than chance that you're like if you were to make a bet, which we don't do because it's haram, but if you were to hypothetically make a bet, you would want to bet on a failure rather than a success of a marriage, okay? So that's pretty concerning. Now, that brings us to the discussion as to what is going on that is causing this sort of breakdown in marriages. So instead of getting caught in the same pattern of what everybody just does, which is just do what everyone else is doing and the norms and patterns that everybody's accustomed to doing, and yield the same divorce rates, or we have to break that system somewhere. So we should be curious as to what is causing this failure, what is causing this breakdown. Okay? So that curiosity should really spark in our minds. And say, how are we going to avoid this from happening to us? Right? Okay, so there's a poem in Farsi, and there was a individual who would go to, he was known, he had a reputation for being a very upright person, he had a very good character. And so people asked him, where did you learn good manners from? How did you develop such a refined character? He said, I learned it from those who don't have any. Okay, why? Because everything they did, I did the opposite of. Okay? So we don't want to be copying somebody who's failing. Right? If you're in college and you know that some student comes to class half the time or does terribly on their exams, are you going to select that individual to mimic their habits? No. It's just pretty logical. Okay? So we got to apply that same logic here. And so we have this then dilemma. Well, how do we get married without breaking the rules and without just doing eeny, meeny, miny, mo? Right? Because we don't want to do either of those two. They probably won't yield very good results. So we have to do something different. Well, let's take a look at the two cycles to just sort of help us understand that these two paths are not the best paths to pursue. Okay? Especially as young people here in America, we have this tendency to assume, what's the big deal with getting to know somebody before marriage? What's the big deal with dating somebody? I need to know this person. I'm not going to just blindly pick somebody. I'm not going to just let my parents pick somebody from whatever country that you're from and import them over here along with their usual monthly goods that they import, and select this individual to be your life partner. Right? Seems like a natural discomfort, but an unnatural reaction to that discomfort. Okay? And let's talk about it in the context, in the Muslim psyche, thinking from the psychology of a Muslim. How does this make sense? Okay, well, let's take, if we were to make the assumption that getting to know your spouse before marriage is going to lead to more success in your marriage. If that's the assumption, that is the assumption that people go on, right? The more I get to know somebody, the better I'll have a chance at having a successful marriage. Right? This is why people date. This is why people live with each other before marriage. Well, as Muslims, many might not go to those extremes, but if we're to take that extreme assumption, that same logic, and say that then we should assume that if you live together, that's the most that you can get to know somebody, right? Right? The Prophet ﷺ said that you get to know a person after you travel with them, or after you travel with them. And among other things, the other things are not coming to my mind. Anybody remember? Business and neighbors, right? So we would assume, okay, so safe assumption here, but the difference is the difference is here that this doesn't apply when there is a sin, a haram, when there is ma'asiyah, right? وَمَن يُعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولُهُ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ ضَلَالًا مُبِينًا, right? Whosoever transgresses the limits of Allah, then they have gone astray, a very clear error. Okay, so let's take a look at it. Well, cohabitation then should be, by this logic, the best form of relationship. Well, in fact, they list cohabitation, psychological research lists it as a predictive variable for the failure of a relationship. Okay, cohabitation actually does not lead to, there's a higher likelihood, about 70% compared to the 50% of the normative population. Now, we might assume, well, we're going with this logic, if you don't know somebody and you blindly select somebody, that would do worse than getting to know them. Well, that's not the case. Psychologically, I often present this to non-Muslim psychologists, right? I say that arranged marriages seem to yield higher scores in love over the long term than choice marriages do. Okay? So this is the idea. Well, how does this make sense? If you don't know somebody, how is it more likely that you'll love that person by having somebody selected for you than you choosing that person? We're going to talk about why. But for now, keep this in the back of your mind, that arranged marriages seem to yield higher results. Now, let's be realistic though, a little bit. 50% is not hard to beat, okay? So, even in arranged marriages, there may be problems, okay? And there are problems with an extreme sort of, blindfolded selection process. There are problems with that as well, okay? But we're just breaking this logic though. If we're just to look at the fact that just arranged marriages alone, even blindfolding and, taking a lineup like this, you'll probably do better than the 50%. Okay? Here's why. Well, okay, so let me just talk a little bit about the difference here. So that arranged marriages tend to match in terms of families. Okay? So people tend to match families a lot more, and people that come from similar families tend to have similar values and norms and ideals. Therefore, there's less to bridge. Okay? So that's one reason as to why it's more likely that an arranged marriage will do better than a choice marriage. Okay? Now, let's take a look at it on the other end. حُبِّكَ شَيْئًا يُعْمِي وَيُسِمْ. This is a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that your love for something blinds and deafens you. Okay? So, let's take a look at the cultural norm. It's when we have this sort of romantic impression and idea of what marriage looks like, Romeo and Juliet and whatever contemporary sort of soap operas there are to mimic this, and Arab soap operas like in Ramadan that they play and that sort of thing, which is sort of unfortunate. What is it? It's this romantic sort of love, okay? And what's the problem with this? Well, the research finds that when you are making the selection in the passionate stage, you're more likely to overlook things that you should not be overlooking. Okay? And oftentimes people don't select for matching of values and goals and that sort of thing. They tend to just, oh, he's really cute, you know? And so we're just going to go out for lunch or something. And then, by the way, do you pray salah? Okay, so this is sort of a question. It's okay, I'll change him. He's, he dies in the hands of Allah. I'll make dua. Maybe husnul dhan. He's doing okay. He's praying 2 of the 5. That's the start, right? We'll work on the other 3. So, but he's really cute. So we'll just work on the other 3. So that's a problem. And people, even if they don't, this is kind of an extreme example, but even if people don't do that, you're more likely to overlook that. And you're more likely to present yourself in a way that is really positive, right? First impression. So you go out to lunch with somebody, and you're more likely to sit down and have a conversation with them or talk on the phone with them for hours, okay? But are you likely, is that like ongoing? Well, that's the fallacy that the soap operas didn't play out for you. Okay? They didn't put in the disclaimer, by the way, this will fade. Okay? Like this is, be advised, this is the early stages of Romeo and Juliet's life. Later, I think somebody dies in that story, right? But if we're to suppose that they didn't die, okay, they might be seeing me for counseling. Okay? Well, maybe not me, they might be scared away by me, but somebody like me, without a big beard. Okay, so they might be, so the point is that does fade over time. That fades over time. Now what you have, well, it sounds kind of bad. I don't want to ruin marriage for people. You're left with what the person really is, right? So, in fact, in our history, once upon a time, when we had the Ibn Sinas and the Al-Razis were writing about these things, they described, our Muslim intellectuals from the past described this phenomenon called love sickness. And they gave it a name. They said it's a disorder. Okay? Now, if we think about it clinically from a psychological perspective, it makes full sense. It should be a sickness just like the other sicknesses. Well, we'll look at it. It affects your social life. It affects your occupational. You're always thinking about the person, your concentration. You're more likely to have familial tension, to fight your parents over this person. You're more likely to be, lose sleep, eat illusions, right? So, and daydreaming, fantasizing, zoning out. So it should be a disorder, right? Why is it not a disorder? Well, because culturally, that's what people want to be Majnoon. Majnoon and Layla, right? People want to be the Majnoon. And so that is the problem. That's why it's not considered a sickness. But by our standard, it's still a sickness, okay? So it's not going to prove as successful for you to select based upon this alone. Now let's take a look at this graph. The marital happiness over time. It looks kind of bad, I'm sorry. All these, oh my gosh, I'm not getting married anymore. This guy's burst my bubble. It's just too much work. Okay, so first you have the honeymoon stages, which actually this is a long estimate. 2 to 3 years. I rarely see 2 to 3 years. I see maybe a year at most, 6 months, maybe less. Yeah, 3 to 6 months maybe. And then sometimes 2-3 weeks, unfortunately. But we have a long. Even if we're to suppose that these people are, this is Majnun and Layla actually, 2-3 years, right? So they start to plummet after a while. When the love theorists, psychologists, they divide love into 2 categories. They say passionate love and companionate love. Passionate love is the love that is the sickness that we're describing. Okay, it's enjoyable. It's something that we should, experience hopefully at some point in our lives. Hopefully after marriage, inshallah. But it fades away, and what happens is now the degree of dip that you're going to take is relative to the differences that you have to merge. Okay? So if you're like from totally different planets, okay? And we're not just talking about males, females being from different planets. You guys are just so different from each other. Okay? Then you're going to take a larger dip and more differences that need to be bridged. Okay? And so we'll sort of talk about what the moral of that story is afterwards, because here's where I transition into making proposals for then how are we to sort of structure ourselves such that we are moving in the right direction, inshallah. So we'll stop here and everybody can get ready, make wudu for Maghrib if they need to do so, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Okay, so some of you are just joining us right now, and some of the brothers have come out from hiding, and some of them are still hiding, and so we don't have the same turnout of ratio, which is usual. Men tend to think they know everything, and they don't. They don't. What's another man going to tell me about marriage for? I mean, I know what marriage is about. Don't tell me how to deal with women. So let me do a quick sort of recap. It will be a really short recap for those who are just joining us. Basically, thus far, I've entertained or discussed the dilemma that as Muslim Americans we face here in the U.S. With the problem of whether we're going to get an arranged marriage or how not to break the Sharia and the rules of the Sharia, while at the same time not falling into the trap of while at the same time not just blindly selecting somebody for an arranged marriage that might be set up for us. So that's sort of what we've been covering. We've sort of looked at some of the negative aspects of selecting for choice, and in fact the research is pretty conclusive, and you'll have to take my word on it if you're joining me now, because I presented it earlier, that choice marriages tend not to prove as successful as even straight up blindfolded arranged marriages. And so I was talking about the two stages of love before we broke. There's a passionate and companionate, and the passionate is basically the honeymooning stage of the relationship, and after that fades, it starts to decline. The marital satisfaction tends to decline. And so we're going to talk about what are the variables that cause it to decline, and how are we going to make sure that we don't, we can minimize this dip. Okay? So this was basically more about the arranged marriages. So we had so what tends to happen, and this is we're beginning to sort of see some light here about some kinds of relationships that are seemingly a combination of the two that seems to yield better results. Okay, so Asian American Indians, for example, tend to be, regardless if they're Muslim or not, tend to have a very strong cultural element of arranged marriages. So if you want to study arranged marriages, you're going to look in the Asian Americans because they tend to preserve very strongly that arranged marriage cultural concept. Okay, whether they're Muslim or not. Okay, and so they tend to, as we mentioned before, despite, even if they don't get a chance to know the person, and they blindly just select somebody, or families select for people, they tend to report better marital satisfaction than most Americans who just end up dating and getting married. But here's the thing, even though they report a higher level of love than the choice marriages, there's a group of people that tend to do even better than those two. And this is where we're moving towards that path of moderation. Okay? The path in between is where you have Asian Americans who tend to be more involved in the selection process, the youth that grow up here, the second generation or third generation of youth that grow up here, they tend not to be as comfortable with the idea of, imported goods along with your spouse, right? As we mentioned before. They tend not to be as comfortable with that. So they really want to be part of the process. They want to be part of the decision-making process. Okay? And therefore, they tend to work with their families a lot more. And in fact, interestingly enough, which is sort of unfortunate for us as Muslims who don't tend to hold to our religion as firmly as we should, is that Asian Americans tend to, regardless if they're Muslim or not, tend to want to preserve their cultural mode of getting married. Okay? Meaning that they want to alter it a little bit, get more of their opinion and their say, but they don't want to do away with it altogether. So they are very comfortable with going to their parents and saying, let's, help me find somebody, let's go and find somebody, that sort of thing. And they, the ones who tend to work with their parents or their extended family in finding somebody, and are involved in the process of selection and meeting the individual as well, tend to have the best results in terms of marital satisfaction. Okay? Well, let's take a look at, so this is where I'm beginning to get into the proposed elements. Now, that might be fine for those people, which gives us some hints as to what direction we should go as Muslims, but we need to also look at our situation in terms of looking at our context as Muslims. So how do we bridge this? How do we sort of make this happen in the context of our religious belief and our social context and setting? Okay? So some of the negative aspects of these arranged marriages is, of course, first of all, this blindfolded guessing game that tends not to be as satisfying for Americans because of the fact that they tend to, culturally, again, we talked about, they want the Romeo and Juliet, they want the, Majnun and Layla sort of like phenomenon. But whereas if you, like in arrangement, very, very, very traditional arranged marriages, they don't care about that, okay? It's sort of a generalization here. I guess I should say they don't care about it as much as Americans do. They tend to adopt a cultural mentality or psychology of being married for fulfilling roles at the very minimal. If they get love in there and passion, that's bonus. Right? That was like, wow, I got a free drink at the movies. That's pretty awesome, Like, you don't expect that. They didn't expect that. It's not part of the package. They tend to go in thinking, well, this is who my parents want me to be married to, so let me just marry this person. Hopefully, things will turn out just fine. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't, unfortunately. But the point is that they tend, if there is no love or passion or anything like that, they're not terribly disturbed by that. They're just like, you know what? They respect each other in their roles. They respect the husband, they respect the wife in their respective roles, and they move on with their relationship. So for them, they don't really experience this whole decline either. Why? Because a lot of these arranged marriages tend to come in with same family backgrounds, right? So they tend to have same norms. The same kinds of food, the same types of, they saw their parents having the same roles and they have the same roles and they just sort of do the same sort of thing. So there's not as much to bridge here, okay? Whereas, so here is the problem for us as American Muslims. Here's the context element of it. Now, we would like to say maybe ideally that everybody should just be okay with whatever they get, like, those fortune cookies, even though they're like haram, right? Because you're not supposed, you're supposed to rely on Allah only. But they tend not to be as real, as fulfilling for Americans because of the fact that they want this sort. They can't help the fact that they want. So, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to love and have passion and get along with your spouse. So that's sort of the contextual element that we have to consider. Therefore, using that whole traditional, very blindfolded arranged marital construct might not be as effective for American Muslims. Okay, so it also diminishes choice, and it's also strictly culturally rooted. I mean, some Muslim cultures do this. They don't allow for their children, the respective families, to meet each other at all or to see each other at all. Where there's a hadith about going to see and you're being advised to go see your spouse. So this is something of a cultural phenomenon that is not good. Okay, the mahr issue, for example. There's people are unfortunately treating marriage like they're buying women or something, and a woman's worth is considered by her dowry. So these are cultural elements that are sicknesses that were not designed and were not part of the construct of the Sharia, how things should be. And having some cultures do this as well. I don't know if I hope they don't do it here. Is that they would, they would hang up the sheets, for example, after they get married, after they consummate the marriage, to prove that they married a virgin, for example. So there are these sorts of cultural phenomenons that are actually can go against the Sharia. Okay, so that can go against the intended or Islamically, mode of getting married. So there are negative aspects about this. So what we want to do is we want to clean this up. We want to clean this up. Look at our context. Look at what our religion advises, and be able to be right in the middle, the path of moderation. Okay. So how should we look at, so then what is, what can we conclude? What can we take away from some of these points? Well, one of the things is that very clearly there is something about similarities that tend to prove better results. That's what the underlying theme of these arranged marriages is. Okay? So similarities, the logic is that we love ourselves so much that we want to be married to ourselves in an opposite gendered form, okay? Which, it sounds kind of gross, but it's sort of a reality, okay? And here's the logic. If you were married to yourself, like hypothetically, we're just play with the, just imagine, okay? Here, don't just, okay? If you were, well, don't imagine, just, that might be, If you were hypothetically married to somebody almost like yourself, then you would, I know what I like for dinner, so I don't need to tell anybody that. It's just going to be made, okay? I know what I like when I'm mad, whether I like to be approached or not approached or to be left alone. I know what my goals are. I hope. I should, right? And so should you. I know what my values are. So the other person just knows the exact same thing, and therefore you have no differences to merge. And therefore we go back to this curve here. These are differences that you have to merge. And what is it about raising children that causes it to go down even more? Because you have to synchronize even more. If you thought merging your differences was hard enough, just the two of you, now add another variable as to what you guys believe about how a child should be brought up. What should they be beat? Should they not be beat? Should they be? Should they have to learn the Quran at 6 years old or 10 years old, or should they be a hafidh or they shouldn't be a hafidh of the Quran? You have all of these sort of, and children, it's like a vested interest. Like, what? I can let go of some things, but don't mess with my child. Okay, so especially women actually, which is natural. They might have a whole sequence of events planned out for them, and it's more difficult to merge that because like. We can maybe choose to disagree on certain things, but it's not going to happen with the child, okay? I want it my way. So that's why you tend to take a larger dip. So the more similarities between the two of you, the more likely it is that you will succeed in the relationship. Now, okay, what about the whole, people tend to throw this around. Well, they say, you know what, opposites attract, right? You ever heard that before? Okay. Well, I'm here to throw that out, okay? Opposites do not, well, it depends on what we're defining as attract, okay? They attract in terms of gender, right? I mean, that should be the case. If not, come see me afterwards. We'll sort you out, inshallah. But opposites may attract in the beginning, okay? So, take, for example, an introvert versus an extrovert, okay? So the introvert might be really shy or really, sort of not so outgoing and that sort of thing. And but the extrovert tends to approach the introvert and say, hey, assalamu alaikum, how are you doing? Well, hopefully in the context of a mahram and, all of that, right? I'm just assuming that you're just throwing in all of the Islamically, correct, modes of doing this. So the person might be really, I don't like the fact that this person approached them, or like the fact that this person seems confident about themselves, or like the fact that they really know what they want and they'll go out and be bold and get it. And maybe there's a part of the introvert that wants a little bit of that, okay? So they end up getting married, but now, you're married and 5 years later, the extrovert is chatting it up with the cashier, saying, hey, how's it going? Let me tell you a little bit about Islam, and sits next to her too closely, So now you're going to be a little upset, right? You're going to be a little bit upset, a lot upset, right? Or you should be. So there's the problem is that now, research finds that the same character trait that you felt with opposites, that you fell in love with the person over, is the same thing that you hate about them later. Okay? Here's the deal. It's okay, now the person's saying, you know what? All right, let's go bungee jumping. No, I just want to stay at home. Okay? Or let's go, let's just drive across the country. It's it's a weeknight, we have children, we have school tomorrow. It's probably not a good idea, right? But you like the spontaneity originally. It was exciting when it was just the two of you, not doing, not having too much responsibilities. But now, you have children, you have career and things to go, and this person wants to be spontaneous. That's not going to work, okay? But that might be the same thing that you fell in love with this person over, right? But then you hate it later on. So, point is, don't get deluded by this whole opposites attract thing. Go with the similarity, okay? Now, how are we going to find out? How do, okay. Yeah, so individuals that are matched across different domains and the things that they're... Now, a person doesn't have to be exactly the same as the other person, nor should they be, okay? Then we would be marrying ourselves, and that would be disgusting. But they should have some differences, which is, a little exciting. So, but they should match across really important variables, okay? So religious values, for example, should be very, very important. They should match in terms of values, in terms of big goals, okay? So if your spouse wants to have 10 children in the future and you only want to have 2, well, that's going to be a problem, okay? And you probably don't want to settle on 5 and that person wants more than that. That's, it's a huge difference, okay? If we're talking about 2 and 3, or 4 and 5 difference is fine. You can settle those. But the more different across these domains, the more likely it is that it will not end up being a good situation. Here's another thing. Do not try to marry somebody to change them. Okay? Never make the mistake. This is when you know that you have some other vested interest. This is حُبُّكَ شَيْئًا وَيُعْمِي وَيُسِمْ. This is where you're blind, deaf, and dumb by your love. Okay? This is where, what motivation, if you really, and do your self-assessment, be aware of yourself. What motivation do I have to change this person? if I don't want to marry them as they are right now, what is the motivation behind it? Oh, because I think they're cute, right? They're so cute. Imagine if they were like praying all the salahs now. That'd be an amazing combination, right? But you can't make that combination, okay? Don't get it in your mind that you're gonna, and the men. من رأى منكم منكرا فليغيره بيده. Don't not here, okay? This is not the you see a munkar and you're going to change it with your hand by getting married to the person and like changing it, okay? This is this leave that one alone, okay? So you have to ask yourself, are we matching on certain variables? And now we're getting to I already talked about that. Look at that. Okay, people are yeah, okay, here's another thing. So that people here's where we're getting into the elements of helping you make that assessment without necessarily having to interact with them excessively, okay? People are often products of their families. As much as you know, that might seem disgusting too, it's a truth, okay? So many people say, you know what, I'm never going to be like my dad. I'm never going to be like my mom. But then they find like 5 years later, oh my God, I think I'm my dad. You know, it's they tend to adopt the similar behaviors. Why? Well, people tend to develop norms based upon their families of origin. Okay, where did you learn how to be a wife? Where did you learn how to be a husband? Unless you took my seminars like for a year or something, which. Okay, fine, you know. But if you haven't, then you're just going to go based off of what you've seen. Okay? So I saw my parents interacting in this way, so this must be normal. We're social human beings, creatures by our very design. We tend to role model and mimic things that seem normal. How we determine, this is the problem with Muslims today as well. They tend to take, this is just a tangent by the way, I thought it might be an interesting tangent. So they tend to, so Muslims today, and many American Muslims unfortunately, is that they tend to ask questions that are based off of their own norms. Okay? So if you grow up in the society, you believe that it's important for a woman to be a career woman. We're not having that debate, by the way, so don't jump at me, okay? It's just an aside, okay? If you have this idea that, you know what, the value and worth of a woman is in her ability to be independent and career-driven, for example, if that's a very American idea, okay? So then that leads a person, based on their norms, to then question and say, you know what, well, does Islam require this? Does Islam require that? Do you have to wear hijab? Do you not have to? Because you're going based on your own norms. Okay? So if you were to be raised, this is why in the books of fatwa of the past, you rarely find questions asking about, is hijab necessary? You know, is it permissible or not permissible? Again, okay, fine, it's permissible. We're not talking about that, okay? But the point is, they're very American, and not that there's anything wrong with some of these questions, okay? I'm not trying to say that there's anything. We have to be contextual, okay, with our setting and society. But the point is that we tend to take our norms and we project them upon Islam. Okay, rather than taking Islam and allowing that norm to shape us. Okay, so to say what is, and here's where I'm getting into, here's where I'm going to get myself in trouble. Here's where I'm getting into the controversy. Okay, here is where we are accustomed to marriages of big weddings. Here is where we're accustomed to big mahars. These are norms, okay, that have been shaped by other than Islam. Here's where we get into the fact that Muslims should get married at 26, 27, 30 years old. Who said that? What is the norm in Islam? Have we looked into what the norm is in Islam? The norm in Islam, now I understand the context, okay? My suggestion is not for you to get married right at puberty, okay? Maybe not a good idea. But at least in the ideal of Islam is to have abundance of children, to be married very young, okay? Now is that realistic for us? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. But we need to recognize the ideals. And then we need to look at what are the norms that we've been influenced by by our society, by our families and backgrounds and that sort of thing, and how do they conflict or not? Now, they may be permissible, okay? It might be okay, like there's nothing that says you have to get married really young. But are we then redefining the normal based upon something else? Okay, now I'm going to get into that a little bit. That's a little bit of like a topic of passion for me. So, try to listen to what I'm saying and don't attack me about it. We'll talk about it afterwards, inshallah. Because, when you question a norm, you're naturally going to sort of take some backlash. And I'm prepared, okay? Okay, so that was the tangent that we're gonna touch upon again. But let me rewind a little bit. The reason why I mentioned that is because where it came from is that we tend to take our norms based upon what we see. So in our families. So the similarities attract. Meaning that if you grew up in a family that tends to have similar gender roles, your mom was always, if you're one family, mom was always working, okay? And they needed to be for whatever reason, that's fine, okay? Nothing wrong with that. And then you have a couple where mom was never working, okay? And mom was always at home, took care of the kids, cooked and cleaned and that sort of thing. And this one, they shared the responsibility because it makes sense. And people should share the responsibility if they're working, right? So they shared the responsibility, and therefore that was the norm that they were raised in. Now these two people get married, okay? Who's doing the cooking? Well, who's working, who's not? Well, according to one of them, they're working, one of them is not. Right? Because they come from different families. They're used to different things. And so it's going to be different. It's going to be harder to merge. And this is natural. This is natural to have differences in perception. We're not identical human beings. We grew up in different backgrounds and settings. So we are naturally going to have differences. But here's where your responsibility is. Find the most significant similarities to you and mark them off. Okay, and say, you know what? This has to be the same. We have to agree on this here. Okay? And mark those off. And the other ones say, if it's there, okay, if not, whatever, right? So then you at least are going in with like an intelligible, like don't just go in, you know what? People take getting married more, they take picking their fruit more seriously than getting married, okay? You know what, there's like a science to picking a watermelon. I know my dad does it, right? He picks up, right? And then he's listening, the color, rolls it down the hallway, right? You see, he went on an angle there. That's not right. Okay? So it's like a science, right? But then when people get married, they're either, this person's nice, we would get along, okay? And then the parents are like, what'd you think? Oh, I liked him. Okay, and well, there's more to just liking them. Like, did you check your assessment list, right? Did you check if they met the criteria? It's either that or the other extreme that we talked about. It's like, you know what, mom and dad present like 5 options, and you're like, let's put them in a hat, the names, okay? And whichever one comes over, that must have been a sign, right? That I just picked this one. This is fate, right? So. Yes, but you have a responsibility to tie your camel and to figure out what you need to do. So you need to take this seriously. And marriage is hard work. Okay, marriage is serious. It's not a game. People think, you know what? We'll just figure it out. That's what all this passion is. This passionate love. It's about figuring it out. It's like, you know what? We love each other. We'll figure it out. As long as we have love, we'll figure it out. You love me, right? Yeah, I love you. Okay, we'll figure it out. No, you're not going to figure it out now, okay? And don't fall in love before you figure it out, okay? So allow yourself to fall in love before, after you figure it out. Okay. So basically there may be the case that people tend to, in the beginning stages of the marriage, tend to adopt new ways of interacting with their spouses that are not resembling their parents, but sometimes people tend to revert back to their parental norms. Here's why. When there are situations and circumstances that are new, that you've never thought about before, what you do is you react the way your parents reacted. You don't have any other alternative model in your mind. Okay? So take, for example, some form of frustration. Something gets you mad about something. All of a sudden, you're doing what your mom might have been doing. And you're like, wait a minute, why did I do that afterwards, right? But that was the only natural response that you knew to do in that moment. That was the natural gut inclination. Okay? So just something to consider. So part of assessing is get to know that family. See what the parents are like. See what their roles are in that family. Are they affluent? Are they not affluent? Do they match in terms of your social status? Because if you're a princess and brother's just trying to, make ends meet, by princess I mean that you have a lot. There's nothing wrong with being a princess. What's wrong with you? I call my daughter a princess. People are reacting to that. Right? Is that wrong? No. Okay. So, see, preconceived notions. Okay. So if you sort of had a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that, the person has a lot and is accustomed to having comforts, driving new cars, having a big home, that sort of thing. Now, and then they get married to a brother who doesn't have a whole lot, then there's always going to be disputes. There's going to be, because you're accustomed to that. That's what you're, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's why in fiqh we talk about kufu, right? That there should be a match in terms of the marital status. You guys are really having fun with that. The princess, there's princesses in the audience, she said? Okay. Then they should be looking for princes. Depends on how you define prince, I guess. Wow, that bar is really high. Okay. All right. So, marry for taqwa. Now this is where I call attention to your first checklist should be taqwa. And I'm not going to tell you from like a preacher sort of stance, okay? I'm just going to tell you from a very practical standpoint, okay? Psychological, okay? So when a person, you marry that brother, and that brother, if he doesn't fear Allah, and you think he was a really, really nice guy, well, he's really, really nice because he loves you. You guys are, you have a good connection. Well, you're not always, newsflash, you're never going to always have a good connection, okay? It's never endless. You're going to have fights. Surprise, right? That's not news, right? Okay. So you're going to have some fights. You're going to have some disputes. Now, what happens when you have that dispute and that person does not fear Allah? Will they still take care of your rights? Will they still give you your rights? What motivation do they have to give you your rights? They don't like you right now. They don't have much motivation to give you your rights. The only motivation that's going to make them give you your rights is that they fear Allah. That I fear Allah, that خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِهِ وَأَنَا خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِي. As the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of you, among you are those who are good to their families, and I'm the best to my family. Right? So, a person thinks in that moment that, what will my Allah think of me that if I don't take care of my wife or husband? Okay? Then they will do it even though they dislike it. Maybe, they'll just put the food on the table, they just kind of go like this. Right? But they'll still put it there, The point is that they're still going to do it. I lost my water now. Lesson, don't throw your water in the talk, okay? Alright, so, and then our wealth, family status, beauty, and religion, and, we know this hadith, right? Okay. Okay. This is basically what I was alluding to. This is what I call the God compass. Basically tawakkul. Okay, it just sounds fancy. So when you believe that your reward is with Allah, then you will do for somebody else just because you're expecting from Allah. Let's take another practical example. A person who fears Allah. Well, very common is a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law dispute. Okay? Very common. There's a certain element of this is very natural, like it's a female thing, okay? I won't understand it, but maybe you will. But there's this sort of natural sense of dislike, if you may, there, okay? So what happens is that oftentimes, I see this all the time, this is among the number one problem, among the top problems, okay? Husband wants to go and visit mom. They want to go together as a family. Mom, the wife says, you know what? The hell with your mom. I'm not going. I hate her. She is a bleep bleep bleep. Okay, and then he says, how dare you talk about my mom that way? Who do you think you are? How dare you take your mom's side? And so on and so forth. Okay, so hopefully, if you're not married, you won't go through that. If you are, hopefully, you're not going through that. Okay, but this is sort of natural. Okay, so the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law situation. Now here is a scenario where a person thinks from the, maybe mother-in-law actually did not do anything. Sorry, maybe she did do something, and she actually does not deserve to be visited. Okay, let's just hold that truth. Okay, say that, you know what, your mother-in-law is really a jerk. Okay, let's just go with that assumption. Well, if she is a jerk, fine. But who created that relationship between you and her? Who made the relationship? Your husband was the means, right? But now, once you've been married, who solidifies the rights between husband and wife? Allah. Who's the legislator, the Shari'? He is the legislator. So, if Allah is the legislator, then maybe the person doesn't deserve it. But what are you really saying if you don't actually go and make relations with that person? You're saying Allah doesn't deserve it. Na'udhu billah. Because Allah is the one that made the relationship. And He's the one, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها, that Allah will not put a responsibility on any soul that they can't bear. So He is the one that put that relationship there. So now the question is your mother-in-law really worth your relationship with Allah? That means that if you don't go, she is so valuable that she's worth sacrificing your religion for. Allah. Because Allah says, whosoever doesn't, this comes in a hadith about, whosoever breaks ties, Allah will break ties with him or her. Right? So is any individual worth our breaking of ties with our family members? With Allah? No. Nobody's that important. Okay? So that's taqwa. That's taqwa. That's when a person thinks in the moment when they hate it the most, and they are patient and they do for somebody else, in that moment, that's even more. Why? Because think about this. That's more rewarding. Because that is true tawheed. If you do something for somebody that you like, you happen to like that person too, so you want to do that for that person too. Incidentally, you're also going to get reward for it. Right? But what about when you have to do for a person and you hate that person? That's taqwa. That's when you're saying to yourself, that's tawheed. Because then you're saying that tawheed is not just, I just believe in one Allah. Tawheed is amali as well, is an action. That you believe that there's nobody else that's going to give you that reward except Allah. Right? Like the situation with the, khalas, we'll leave that because I want to make sure I get through the rest of it. Okay. So it produces selflessness. Taqwa produces selflessness. وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَّاصًا. That the Ansar were described in the Quran as being people who give up from themselves, give preference to somebody else, even though they themselves might need it. So what is the relationship? A person does, يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ. I have this water, I say, you know what? My wife, you drink this first. And then she says, no, you drink it. And it's not fake. You know, we do this custom, you go to like a gathering. تفضل تفضل. It's like, no. It's like, what do you mean? But you really want it. It's like, don't take that piece. I really like that piece. That's fake. Okay, that's just custom. That's just custom. Right? I was in Syria, and there was a cab driver, and he's like, I was a visitor in the ride, and he said, you know what? No, you're a guest. It's okay. You don't have to pay. And I was like, no, I have to pay. I know what he's trying to say. He's just like being nice, right? So I insisted. He ended up charging me 4 times the rate of whatever usual cab ride is. Right? And I was like, what a fake! This guy's telling me he's going to just go for free, but now he charges me 4 times as much afterwards. That's fake. That's not ithar, right? And so, a person does the real selflessness, and that's when a person has control over their nafs. Okay? Provides a common purpose, common ground to work off of. Okay, at the end of the day, you say, you know what? We believe in the Quran. We both believe on the Quran and Sunnah. Put that between us, and if we have a dispute that there is a clear answer for it in there, then let's turn to the Quran and Sunnah, and that will legislate between us. If there's a precedent that was established among the Sahaba, if there was the problem is some of these husbands never show up for counseling. Why? Because they have ego problems. They're never going to go to the sheikh or the imam, because who's the sheikh? I don't know the sheikh. Who's the sheikh going to tell me what to do? That's a pride issue. Okay? When a person has real firm belief that I will do what is correct, then he will go and say, Sheikh, I don't know the Quran and Sunnah how you do. Tell me, give me some advice. And then if it is haqq, then you take it. Okay? وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ تَفَرَّقُوا وَاخْتَلَافُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ جَاءَهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتِ. Right? Okay. Selecting, now here's the assessing part. We'll get into the assessing part. Okay. So, assessing without falling in love. This is a tricky thing. Okay, so you're gonna have to find out about a person without really falling for them. It's okay to like the person, like their personality. That's a factor that should be considered. But falling in love, now you're daydreaming. Okay, now you can't sleep and that sort of thing. That's falling in love. Well, one of the things that I propose is how are you gonna assess? Let's just talk about the mode of assessing first of all. One possible way is, well, get your parents involved if you can. Okay. And if you can, sometimes parents can be difficult to work with in this regard. So get your siblings involved. Get your extended family involved if you can, okay, to help you. And modes of communication, use email, okay, and try to CC your brother or sister on that too at least. So that you're not sort of, when nobody's watching, at the end you just like slip in an ambiguous response that could be interpreted in like a very haram way, okay? But if somebody else is watching, right, that's what ihsan is, right? أَن تَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ كَأَنَّكَ تَرَى, that you worship Allah as if you see Him, right? But, and so when somebody else is watching, you're saving yourself. Supervise interactions, have a family system, setting. You know what? I don't suggest that you necessarily have to sit next to if you're sitting next to a brother and he's sitting next to his mom, he's going to say all the right things, okay? But if he's alone, he might just say, well, my mom was there. What do you want me to say? Like, I'm not going to pray in front of my mom. She's going to slap me. Had we been alone, I would have told you the truth. So sit a comfortable distance maybe away from them. But still within eye distance, meaning that, you know what, you can't laugh too loud or talk too, I don't know what the word is to describe that, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay, phone. Talking on the phone. Now, you have to know when you're talking for the fact that you have to talk business. Meaning that you have to know when you're starting to talk to them more than you're supposed to. When you're calling, you say, you're thinking, I'm getting to know the personality of this person, so you know what, let me call him for the 3rd time today. okay? And say, hey, assalamu alaikum, just want to know what you think about this. You just want to talk to the person, okay? So that is a case where you're just using that as an excuse, okay? All right, what to ask? What are things to ask about? Well, here's where we're getting into the assessment. You're going to have some limited interactions with this person, possibly supervised. You need to get some stuff out of them, okay? If you know that if you know that you're going to have like only a few opportunities at this encounter, you're going to try to get the most out of it. First and most important, religiosity, their values, their life goals, gender roles. I've listed these as very important variables because these are the most important things that come up in counseling, that there are issues later. Expectations of marriage, children or no children, type of lifestyle. Where do you see yourself in 20 years? What kind of lifestyle? Their manner of showing affection. Sometimes one person is a withdrawer. They don't really show much affection. The other person needs a lot of affection. And that might be number 2 on their list. Okay? Work ethic. Okay? Is the person, sits around a lot or don't? Okay. Interactional style. How do they respond to argumentation? Their personality. Okay. Now, how to ask. Now, here's some good ways to ask, here's some bad ways to ask. The reason why I listed these assessment things is that because sometimes we ask, and in psychology we have when we do surveys, we have research methods, you're doing surveys, you never ask things that have a socially desirable response. Okay, and I'm going to explain to you what that means. So, ask open-ended questions. So don't be like, do you think religion is important in your life? Yes. Next question. Well, okay, that didn't give you a whole lot of information, okay? Make sure they don't have it. This is what I mean by socially desirable. Don't ask questions that have a suggested right answer. Yeah, can you tell me about how religion factors into your ideas of marriage? Here's the thing. The assumption is that religion is really good. Because you're saying it. You believe it's good, right? And then you're asking, how does it factor? Meaning it should factor into your life. There's a statement behind every question, okay? Remember that. There's a statement behind every question. When somebody is asking a question, you have to ask, why are they asking me this question? What is the statement behind it? Okay? Here's the correct response that everybody is going to tell you. It is the core of a marriage, and that we are here to please Allah together and attain Jannah together. If somebody doesn't say that, then they're not very, smart socially. Meaning that they need some skills on game. Okay, how to make sure that you secure your spouse. Okay. Well, let's take a look at, where'd it go? Oh, I have this upside down, I think. That's why. They don't teach you this in grad school. I didn't know we had a red light here. That's awesome. Okay. Okay. Well, this is so religiosity, okay? So gauge this through other indicators, not just through the response. Such as, if you were to ask a question, to what extent? So ask yourself this in your mind while you're talking to this person. To what extent does religion come up as a priority? Okay, as part of their goals, in their language, in the way that they speak. Okay, if it's close to Maghrib time, you're on the phone and you're talking about something, and they're just chatting it up way through Maghrib, then there's a problem there. Well, there's a problem if you're doing it too, but but the point is that there's a problem there. Okay, when you ask things like, what does marriage mean to you? Okay, this is a good question. What does marriage mean to you? Do they mention anything about religion? And if they do, when does it come up? Is it a lot? And by the way, Allah also made this it's also half your deen. right? Or does it come as an early response? Okay? When asking about life goals, does religion come up? Okay, what are your goals in life? And they tell you everything, and they don't tell you anything about their religious goals or their goals for the akhirah. Okay, so that means that now you might think, I mean, one isolated question might not do justice to it, but a combination of questions that you're deducing from the fact that this person doesn't seem like they care about religion. Or they don't use religious, if they use religious vocabulary, they say inshallah, mashallah, and not culturally, okay? And not like weak inshallahs that people always do. Are you going to come tonight? Inshallah. You're not coming, are you? Just say the truth. You're not coming. Inshallah. If Allah wills, what's the wrong with that, you know? Okay, do they talk about Allah and the Prophet ﷺ? Okay. All right. Where is it? Hold on. Is there a... Okay, there we go. If you're interested in their ideas about gender roles, which is a very important question to ask, okay? What do they think about gender? If you say, you know what, brother, tell me what you think about how a woman should be treated, right? Well, I think, you know, Allah has given these rights to women, and that Jannah is underneath the feet of a mother, and you know, and we had great the Sahabiya who were great personalities, and women are very important. Okay, that's pretty obvious. Okay, but you know, how do you think a woman should be treated by her husband? That's a bad question. Obviously, any like logical, sensical person is going to say good, or sell you on the fact that they're going to treat you good. Okay, ask things like, what are your expectations in a spouse? Now they can tell you, well, you know what, I think a woman is valuable if she does X, Y, and Z, or if a man is valuable if he does X, Y, and Z, if he works and he buys me a diamond ring all the time, and it's like, okay, that I guess I understand what gender roles you're referring to. Or if a woman is very reactive and her, like you're saying, you know what do you expect in a husband? Well, I expect him to cook and clean for me, and you know, and he's got to do half the response. It's like, whoa, this woman's sister's got some issues with gender roles. You had some bad experiences, didn't you? So when you ask these sorts of questions, better. What is your ideal spouse? Describe it to me. What would they be? Get specific. What would they be doing? Describe to me what an ideal husband or wife would be doing 5 years from now. Lay out some daily activities. What does their day look like? Okay? How good are they with relationships? Chances are, if they're good with relationships, they might be good with you. If everybody hates them and they have no friends and they're like the outcasts of the family, then they might. It's unlikely that everybody else is crazy and they're not, right? It's usually, sometimes it happens, but usually not the case. That's usually the exception. Okay, so you want to ask about how's the relationship with their family. It's like, oh, you know what? Like my brother's a jerk. He he doesn't understand what he's doing with life, and you know what? We don't even talk. My sister, she's in some other country. In fact, I cut her off. My cousin, you know what? I don't even like my mom that much. It's like, oh my God, right? If there are strained relations, this is a red flag. Not always, but ask why. Say how many, and ask why. Like, tell me about the strained relationship. Tell me about it. They're obviously going to tell you that, you know what, this person did this to me and violated me in this way. Okay? Okay. Well, I was going to end at 9:30, and then we would do the Q&A 15 minutes. But it's up to you. It's up to. I'm democratic. We can elect the process. It's up. Yeah, do you want to go? I don't know if you want to ask a question. Go ahead, no problem. If you want to leave the rest of it, it's fine. Whatever you want to do, inshallah.
I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I'm not suggesting you're cutting me off. I'm being serious.
Sorry, I just wanted to check to see if you guys want to plan to come back after Aisha to finish the Q&A, or if you want to go ahead and do that earlier.
Who's willing to come back after? You're not going to hurt my feelings. Just be honest, you know.
Okay. I mean, I'm sorry. Continue.
So you know what we can do? We can go until about 9:30, 9:35. Open it up for Q&A. At 9:40 the adhan goes? Okay. All right, we'll end at 9:30. We'll begin Q&A, and then if whoever wants to come back, they can come back after. If they don't want to, they don't have to. Okay. All right. All right, life goals. And where do you see yourself in 10 years? Can you paint a picture of this for me? Ask for specifics. Okay? Meaning that tell me, give me 20 years down the road, tell me where we're living, what we're doing. Oh, we're living in, I don't know, we're living in Saudi Arabia, in the desert, as Bedouins used to do, because I want to do zuhud and get rid of the dunya from my heart, and I wish to ride a camel for the remainder of my life. How do you... Well, you might not have known that if they drove a car now and they sort of had their usual regular lifestyle. So if you ask 20 years, their goals in 20 years may be way different than what they're doing right now. Okay? So what does it look like? What does life look like? And so describe it. Who's going to work? How many children? Where are the kids? What are they doing? You know? That sort of thing. Okay. Degree of selflessness, see whether they help their parents out or not, you know, that sort of thing. Okay. Okay. I keep flipping this thing. I don't know which way is it. Okay. All right. Well, this was just my little rant to the parents and community in general. Okay. Basically, what my suggestion is that people get married young. Okay, this is a way of avoiding the fitna. Okay, the thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created the human being, and He has created the human being with their inclinations and desires and predispositions. So our biology has been created by Allah, and the sunnah and everything that comes with it goes hand in hand with it. It's to complement the system. If we don't follow the sunnah and we're just going on what is permissible, then we are missing parts of and the fruits of the system. Okay? There's a reason why Islam is structured in the way that it is, and it's necessary for us to mold ourselves towards it. Now this will take maybe a process, maybe individual work, maybe communal effort. But people should get married young. Why? Because when is the most fertile, when's the woman most fertile? When is she most likely to conceive children? At what age? Any guesses? 20s? Early 20s? Yeah, 16 to 18. Okay? Now after the age of 25 and beyond, okay? Now, the likelihood of a child being born with Down syndrome becomes exponentially multiplied as we go through the years, by 5 years and 5 years. Now, that's not to say that it's bad to have a child. So all of this is in the hands of Allah. But there are some consequences for not following the sunnah. Okay? And if you think that it may be the case that, you know what, you're going to be 18 years old, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, and you're going to be 25, and you're never going to have any desire or want to talk to the opposite gender. Why are we having all this fitna? Why is it? Because it's natural. It's natural. It's natural human inclination. Allah did not create this as an injustice to us. Na'udhu billah. He did not create a situation for people to say that, you know what, it's unnatural, that this is going to be such a great burden upon everybody. Okay? Why is it that it's not that, there's a solution that we're not exercising. Now, I recognize that requires work. I recognize that requires effort. But that's a responsibility that the parents and community have to work together. Now, you might not be financially well off, but the parents should maybe help you. If they can help you secure a place, if you can find somebody, they can help you get married early. There are community, and it's not that it's unprecedented. It's unprecedented here. Okay, I'm from Toronto, in Canada. And I was married at 19, and it's very common to get married at that age. And I'm a man, the woman's younger. Okay, so usually, so it's not uncommon in very traditional societies or circles, and they don't deal with that. In fact, you know what I've noticed is that people that get married really young, what they do, like men, like 80% of their actions are geared towards trying to secure a woman. Okay, so why do they drive like a nice car? Why do they do? It's all to get a woman. Okay, so once you've gotten that out of the picture, now they can be human, right? And they can focus. It's that's for a man. For a woman as well, there's a preoccupation in terms of a social need and thinking and fantasize. All of these things. Okay, it's there. So if a person can secure that, they'll be much more productive. Okay, we did not have our Salaf as-Salihin by the age of 30 think about, well, you know, what am I going to do with my life? And who am I going to get married? No, I mean, realistically, that might be a situation, but that should not be the ideal. Right? That's not the way that Islam works. That's my rant, okay, to the community and to the parents. That's my proposal. And I'm saying this as a result of seeing widespread zina everywhere, left, right, and center. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculously getting out of control, okay? And there's a consequence that's an onus upon us as a responsibility to ensure that we have solutions to these problems, and we have to be contextual specific. We can't just say that, you know what, I'm not proposing that everybody who's not ready just go out randomly getting married. They don't know what they're doing. They're going financially struggling and that sort of thing. That's not the solution, but we need a solution, okay? So that was. So you know what? I'll just sort of end here, and when we can go on with the Q&A, inshallah. All right. Yeah, this was basically it. Right there, 16. Yeah, there it is. Nearly 400,000 infants were born to women aged 15 to 19 years old. Okay, in this country, evolutionary psychology explanation. Men prefer. This is kind of a cool little aside. Men tend to prefer younger women, and women tend to prefer a little bit older men. Why? Well, because men, why? Naturally, fertility. It's just a natural, we're just talking sheer biology here, okay? There's a natural sort of fertility, so man wants to have children, okay? And he's more likely to have a child with somebody who's younger. Therefore, he is attracted to somebody younger. Woman, what does she want? She wants the husband not to take off, okay, and to be stable, to have, to be able to take care of the child, to be responsible, to be mature. And men tend to mature later than women, right? And so, so it makes sense that they're more established in society. Okay, so that's basically it. We'll stop here, and we can move forward with Q&A. Inshallah wa akhirin da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
I would just want to say real quick, sorry for interrupting your flow.
I was joking.
Okay, so I'm sure we all came in here on cloud 9, you know what I mean? Oh, we're going to talk about marriage, this is great, let's go to the masjid. And then we came here and he was kind of like, okay, let's bring you back down to earth, you know. Now, alhamdulillah, our feet are stably on the ground.
I burst all your bubbles.
You did,
Nobody
but it's great.
Nobody wants to get married anymore.
Well, it's better than falling from cloud 9 and like landing very hard on the ground, right? So alhamdulillah, now our feet are firmly planted, and now we can, think pragmatically about how we want to use this information, inshallah. So questions from the crowd. Bismillah. Yes. A comment.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. The importance of note-taking. Bismillah. So take some notes if you have it, or when you get home, write down some of the key points so you can remember that in your process, inshallah.
In fairness, maybe people didn't anticipate that I would have like prescriptive elements to this that would be important to remember. I actually thought about printing something out and bringing it, but then when I came here, I got invited to an aqiqah, and so, sometimes you live in the moment.
Yes, absolutely. Any questions? Yes.
Walaikum salam.
American convert.
Yes.
Coming into the community and hearing about engagements, nikah, kitabs. I mean, some people are saying you have an arrangement,
Right.
and you're technically married, but you're not going to live together.
Right.
And so how does that, first of all, is that just a cultural thing? And is it something that can be utilized in getting to know the person?
Yeah, I think that's a possible proposed solution, actually, to being able to get married earlier. For example, getting to know the person. I mean, like if you're using nikah to get to know the person, you bought them, So it's like there's no refunds here. It's over. You're locked in. But people that are screening early on and they want to get married early, or they want people to help them get married and that sort of thing, and they're using their parents, for example, to help them. They might be living with their respective families and they're going through college, for example, and realistically maybe it doesn't work for that. They're just not in the position to be able to provide or to be living on their own, and accommodations can't be made for them to live together. And that's a possible solution, is to be able to get married. Nikah is a very simple thing in Islam. We complicate it. Nikah is very, very simple. The Prophet ﷺ, a Sahabi got married, and and the Prophet ﷺ met him, and he had some yellow color on his, I can't remember if it was hands or body or clothes. And then this was remnants from celebrating his getting married. And then the Prophet ﷺ saw that, and he asked him if he got married. He said yes. And he made dua for him. And so it's so simple. So he didn't say, how dare you not? Do you know who I am? Right? Na'udhu billah. Like, he didn't invite the Prophet of Allah. Right? So why should we be offended? Things people get, I know, like the very like pious and the scholars, some of which I've seen, really act upon this strictly to make a bid'ah out of necessary invitations and all of these things attached to it. And these are cultural things that are not there. So my teacher, for example, his parents were not even at his nikah. His teacher told him, let's get you married, and he went with him to a different country, and he met the girl, and and everything went going. He called his parents, and his parents are the same mindset. They said, you know what, if it's good, if it's khair, go for it. They made istikhara, and it happened. It's a simple thing. That's not to say that you should take it seriously, though. Make sure your parents are there. Like, invite them, okay? But the point is, it's not that complicated. It's the most important thing is finding the person. It's not all of the headache that's attached to it. Who you're going to invite, what dress am I going to wear, what jubba am I going to wear, what kufi am I gonna? I don't know. I don't think men really think about what kufi they're gonna wear, but all of these sorts of like attachments. People spend like $50,000 on a wedding. That's totally ridiculous. I think you should give that as a gift to the couple to purchase a new home. Put a down payment on a new home. You're giving them an investment for their future so that they can think freely about their relationship, as opposed to thinking about the debt that they have to be in for, finances is an important element of a relationship.
Next question.
We were discussing this actually earlier as well. Same question. At times, the individuals themselves.
And the individuals themselves, like the people that are getting married, they're fine with a simple wedding, but a lot of times their families pressure them into doing something extravagant, and there could be a lot of societal or, family issues behind that. But at the same time, it's like, how do we, I don't know, that might be more of like, how do you disobey your quote unquote parents, or how do you navigate these waters?
Yeah, I mean, if it's this case that your parents are telling you to do something that's in disobedience to Allah Ta'ala, for example, a mixed wedding with music and, fancy clothing and that sort of thing, then there's no obedience to the makhluk, whereas there's a disobedience to the Khaliq. Okay, so in that case, I mean, obviously you have to be very gentle. You sort of use your hikmah and wisdom and be as kind and good as possible to, I don't know, maybe come talk to like Sheikh Kifar or something and tell them to like talk to your parents or something to help you, right? They're going to listen to somebody who's your peer, who's their peer, maybe somebody a little bit older than them. But in these, I think this is a burden of responsibility that we all share as parents. Is necessary for them to start to change this custom, to making our weddings more congruent with the qasd, the intent or the purpose of the Sharia, or in the spirit of the Sunnah, the Quran and Sunnah. And the more we do that, inshallah, I think a lot of problems will begin to start to get resolved. Somebody's got to take a stand. Somebody's got to start somewhere. Everyone's like, oh, you know what, I got the pressure and nothing's going to change. If everybody thinks like that, then it's called diffusion of responsibility. Nobody does it.
Now, from what I've seen as a brother, I think that women somehow want like a more expensive wedding or whatnot than men do. I could be wrong. Allah knows best. But from what I've heard and from my own experiences, inshallah, I'm gonna go get married in Pakistan. But like their side wanted a more expensive wedding, and I said no, I want a more simple wedding. And we compromised on a cheaper wedding, but they wanted a more expensive wedding. It's like, what's up with that, And then me and Abdul Aziz, we were talking here about it as well at our school, and a sister overheard us and came over and said, how could that be? I feel like all I should be on me. She was Muslim, by the way. And like all I should be on me. And we said we should get married in the masjid. And she's like, what? The masjid? No, it should be like a grand hall. It should be like this wide open area or something.
Right.
And I just don't understand that. Maybe you could shed some light on it.
Sure. I don't think we can make such a sweeping generalization, but I think that there's an element of truth to that. But I think that's because women generally tend to care. See, there's a psychological difference between men and women in their thinking. Women tend to pay attention to details more than men do, and this is a psychological difference actually, which makes them better at child rearing. A woman is more likely to see that her child is hungry and recognize the different cries and the noises of a child than a man is just like, take this thing, I don't know what he wants, right? And can't deal with the child anymore. So they're not as attuned to details. And that's probably why they don't notice half the things that their wives do as well, which is a point of frustration for women. But there's a different psychological difference between the way that they think in that way. So women tend to tune into more details, therefore they're more likely to want to adorn themselves Okay, be more particular about what they wear and their presentation, for example, which is not a bad thing. It's just where it expresses itself would be the bad thing. If it's in the manner that it's like against haya, for example, then of course that is not that is not permissible. But I mean, that's a red flag that you should be considering in advance. Like if a woman is willing to go in front on a stage, dressed in fancy clothing in front of like thousands of strange men, then it is befitting for the ghaira of a man to not permit that, to not be okay with that, so that he should probably, if that's important to him. If it's not important to him, fine, then fabiha, that's for you then. But if it's important to you, then you should make that suggestion in the beginning. I just want to know what your ideas are about the marital process and that sort of thing. So if she's comfortable in that respect, in that way, well, it's to say that she won't be comfortable in other places that are less extravagant, right? So you have to sort of, I don't think it's necessarily about compromise and settling. You have to sort of assess the person as to what are they willing to do and what are their principles.
Next question.
After being married, I want you to give us, if you can, one piece of advice that you think is most important or helpful. Let's just say after a year of marriage.
Yeah.
That's one piece of advice that we should all, cherish.
Right. That's a difficult one. I'll try. Have no expectations or low expectations and be selfless. Why? If you have no expectations, I don't know if this is planned on purpose. A lot of times about Zian. Stay tuned if you want to know the rest of it when you come back.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله.
Thank you all for coming.
أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Do you want to mention, just officially wrap it up, you can say?
This one's off.
Jazakumullah khair for coming. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you.
It's not working. Yeah, I think inshallah we're gonna wrap it up, you guys. Yeah, I mean it's up to you guys.
Jazakumullah khair for coming. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you. We would be inviting Brother Human, inshallah, for different workshops and
Maybe we can do a
upcoming months,
post-marital
inshallah.
or something. We can
Yeah,
do a
inshallah,
post-marital.
inshallah.
This was a focus on pre-marital
We will.
people,
So, inshallah, just keep visiting our website and inshallah, hopefully within.
They were asking if they can get the email of the PowerPoint, but I don't know how they would do that without.
If you email me,
Inshallah, if a group of people wants to come after Salat Isha,
yes. Yeah,
are you willing to come back after Salat Isha to sit with him for?